Good morning, everyone. This is Breakout Session 1, the National Advisory Committee panel working together in the search and recovery of residential schools missing children. I'm the facilitator today, and when we get to the Q&A period later, I'm going to be the one running the mic. Our panelists today are Elder Lillian Elias, who is an award-winning individual who has won the Order of the Northwest Territories for her work in promoting the Iqaluit culture and language. As I'm dropping the free paper. Our other panelists are Dr. Rebecca Jacques. Over here. Can I get her name? Here, actually, would you like to?
Good morning, everybody. I am teaching Shelley how to light Iqaluit for the first time. She will be passing on the knowledge when she goes home. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really beautiful. Thank you. Our other panelists, Dr. Rebecca Jacques, who is Métis and the investigating coroner with the Office of the Chief Coroner of Ontario, and an assistant professor at the Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry at Western University. And our last panelist is Dr. Andrew Martindale, who is a professor in the Department of Anthropology at the University of British Columbia. And he has worked in partnership with the Musqueam First Nation and the Penelakut, is that pronunciation right? I'm on the ball for pronunciation today. First Nation to make ground search technologies more accessible to communities engaged in searches for unmarked graves and other burial sites. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists.
Uvlami, everyone. Good morning. It's so good to be here to tell you a little story about myself. I'm going to start off with my husband going to residential school. He was going to residential school when he was about 5 or 6 years old. And they had a boat to pick up these people, a schooner to pick up the people, the students from, or children from Tuck, Paulatuck, Sax Harbor, all those places. They pick all these children up from all these communities. They're small communities, but I just mentioned those. And they would pick them up, and this is the first time that my husband, Charles Elias, was going to go to school, to residential school. They're going to take him now. And his mother was so broken-hearted, she didn't know what to do. It wasn't up to her if they're going to take her son. Anyways, she thought, oh, I'm going to put a loaf of bread in the bow of a boat, like the front of the boat, wrap it up and put it there so that she talked to him, told him that if he gets hungry, the trip would be, I would say, maybe 2 days, 2 or 3 days to get to Iqaluit where they're going to put where they're going to be staying for the rest of the year. Well, his mother put that loaf of bread in a bow of the boat, and my husband never thought of it because he was just a little boy, 6 or 7 years old. And then that boat brought the students, and the next year they were going to pick up some more students, and she thought, oh yeah, I better check to see if my son took that bread. They checked. She went and checked. It was just rolled up, just moldy. He never touched it. And that's the way the residential schools were. I'm just talking about my husband's because he didn't have time to tell his story about residential school. Not one word, only when he was drinking. That's why you see a lot of people drinking, trying to take whatever is holding them, to take it out, and that's the way he was. He told me only about 3 stories, and that's it. I helped them, but I didn't know who to give them to or how to help him. But it was the same year that TRC started. That following year after he passed, 95 he passed. That following, maybe next year or so, TRC started. And as soon as they asked me, they said, Lillian, would you like to be a elder support worker? I said, sure. Just thinking that if I could help one person to talk and tell me about what happened to them in residential school. I went to residential school myself. And I had a lot of things that happened that, and it's hard for us to talk about because a lot of us are still holding on to things that we shouldn't be talking to other people about what happened because of how we were treated in there and what happened, all the things that happened. Only one thing that I always thought about was when we would have to, the building was run by the heat from the big stove only, in the furnace. There was a big stove in the furnace. A lot of us, we took turns. There's maybe 8 of us. We would go down together and we would put big logs in the stove. And they would tell us that there was a lot of babies that was burnt in there. And that's why today I'm carrying a lot of babies. This cover here that I have has a lot of babies I'm carrying. If I could carry people that were in the same place as my husband, today I would do my best to help. But with that, at the end, when my son was 5 years old, my son, he's the one that went to Sax Harbor. He went to Sax Harbor. He just learned how to trap, just learned things all over. He forgot all this, how to do those things, traveling in a cold weather and trapping and things like that. His father taught him. His father taught him well. He knew how to trap. He knew how to do everything, tackle. Oh, I just about know all the trapping styles. And he was so excited about it. But when my son turned 5 years old, he said, we're going back to Inuvik. I said, you were doing good here. We got a place to stay and everything. He said, no. One thing that's going to happen is that none of my children are going to go to residential school, not even open the door to see how it's like there. I'm not going to ever let my children go to residential school. And that's what happened. Today, none of my children went to residential school. But when everybody was getting dividends and, getting paid for all this, my children all looked at me and said, Mom, how come you didn't even at least let us go there for a couple of days? A couple of days so we could get some money too? Oh, I'll stop there and, we'll hear more this afternoon. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to be a guest here in Iqaluit and to visit your beautiful land. I'm grateful to the organizers at the Office of the Special Interlocutor for the work they do, and to Kim Murray for the invitation for us to be here. I want to acknowledge the prayers and the ceremony and thank all the survivors for their strength and their leadership in this sacred work. My name is Andrew Martindale, and I'm a settler Canadian. I'm a member of the National Advisory Committee, and where I assist with the development of guidance on technical parts of searches for missing children. I am a professor of archaeology at the University of British Columbia, and I work in partnership with the Musqueam Indian Band, with whom I develop and teach classes for Indigenous communities on how to do their own searches. And I've been called as a witness by the Penelica tribe to assist them with the locating of missing children from the Cupar Island Industrial School. I also want to thank the team from the National Advisory Committee. The National Advisory Committee is led and managed by a group of accomplished Indigenous women whose strength and vision guides us. And I think they are somewhat concerned that I might perish up here in the cold because they know that white guys aren't the smartest of people. And if you were here last night in the comedy event, you would have learned that everybody needs a white guy. But I think the message is you have to keep an eye on them. I also want to thank the team at the the National Advisory Committee then is guided by a circle of survivors, of which Lillian, of course, is a member. It is Indigenous-led and largely staffed by Indigenous experts in all parts of searching for missing children, from archival investigations to ground searches to identification and forensics, which is what my colleague, Dr. Rebecca Jacques, will speak to shortly. And our work on the committee focuses on a few things. We identify and develop guidance for survivors and communities on how to conduct searches. We strive for a trauma-informed understanding, and we're guided by survivors in all parts of our work. We have developed guides that will help you plan, some of which are on the tables that you'll see. We host webinars of the steps involved. We have a website, which is a central place for the information that you can find, so you can find reliable and comprehensive resources to help you in the work ahead. We also meet with communities and project teams, as well as subject matter experts, to learn of their needs and to build from their understanding of best practices, which we then communicate to everyone doing this work. We make recommendations to government on what is needed to support survivors and communities as they look for missing children. The work that you're engaged in is vast. It will take many years to complete, maybe even decades. The National Advisory Committee is aware of the government's divisions of the land into the 140 schools of the Settlement Agreement and the 5 in the Anderson Agreement. We also know that children died at hostels, so-called Indian hospitals and other places, but we don't really make those distinctions. Our mandate is to assist you in finding missing children from residential schools wherever they may be, and with no exceptions. All of the children deserve to be found. Many communities are at different stages in this work, and all are searching different kinds of landscapes. Some even need to search bodies of water, or in difficult places such as ruined buildings, or, as Lillian mentioned, even in furnaces. My first message to you then is that this is complex work, and it will take time and it will take capacity. Our Navigator Guide, which is on the tables, will assist you in the planning, and we're going to be releasing a new updated version soon. In addition to hosting meetings and online webinars, many of us are available if you want direct help, and several of us are willing to travel to visit you if you wish. My second message is that while searching the land is essential, it may not be your first priority. Our most important task is to support survivors, to make sure that they have the care that they need, and to allow them to tell their stories if they are able. Working with archives is often one of the first steps that communities will take, since this can help to identify places where children might be. Searching the land is important, but as urgent as it can feel, the land and the children will be there in the years ahead. And we want to do this work well, and that can take time. We suggest that the pathways of this work will have many steps, from supporting survivors, engaging in ceremony, learning survivor knowledge, searching archives, analyzing records, building physical and digital infrastructure to house these results, creating memorializations, and even conducting forensic excavations and using DNA for identification. Each of these is complex and a specialized task that can require training, experience, infrastructure, and staff. I want to speak briefly about what I know best, which are the search methods. And while searching can be technical and scientific, it is important to remember that searching does not provide any truth that is not already known from survivors. All we're doing is helping find where on the land the children are resting. If you're engaged in a technical endeavor, there are several parts. We think of it divided into three main tasks. Firstly, you're going to need a place to store all the information that you encounter. Information from archives, from survivors, a place to put any new information from search teams working on the ground. Most communities will do this with maps and may develop databases, and many are turning to GIS, geographical information systems. And while this can be a valuable tool, it's also a specialized skill. Usually, we collect two kinds of information. We map the land, and then we explore underground, the subsurface, using geophysics. For the first, we'll often use drones and something called LiDAR as ways of mapping the surface of the ground. These tools are sensors that send out light, and then they record reflections, and they can be assembled into three-dimensional models of the surface. LiDAR uses infrared light, and it's often able to map the ground underneath plants, so it can see beneath forests and trees. If you have a new iPhone, you have LiDAR on your iPhone. It's becoming very common. It's the same technology that we find in self-driving cars. So it's becoming more ubiquitous. These models of the land can then be used to store and explore other kinds of information, such as the long history of air photographs that the governments have collected, which can help us understand the landscape over the many decades of change of these institutions. We can also use these models to help survivors locate exactly where they know children's graves are. This can be especially challenging if the land and the buildings have changed, and these maps and models allow us to better find on the land today where their memories lead them from the past. For underground, we have several methods, including ground-penetrating radar, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. There's also various systems using magnetometry and other kinds of electrical scanning tools, including technologies such as search dogs. Ground-penetrating radar tends to get the most attention because it has a very long history of being used to locate unmarked graves in cemeteries, where it's been very successfully applied. And our current thinking is that more than one method will be valuable, and different methods may work in different places. So what works in the coastal rainforests where I am from may not work up here in the north. We also want you to know that these technologies are changing fast, and that the ways of using these tools for this work is always being refined. And it seems like every month there's another discovery in a rainforest somewhere of a city that had otherwise not been identified. These are archaeologists using tools like LiDAR, so it is revolutionizing a lot of the ways that we understand the land across the world. The National Advisory Committee wants to work with you if you're doing searches so that we can learn from your experience and help others, communities, find the best tools. The last piece of this analysis of these is usually the analysis of these results to help identify where missing children might be. This can then lead to discussions about memorialization or even excavation, depending on your community's decisions. This step is usually the one that's the most specialized, and the National Advisory Committee is working to connect all the communities doing this work so that we can build a network of practice. We can learn from each other and support each other and build standards so that we can be sure that everyone is doing this at an appropriate level. Many people are able to offer their services in ground searches, but there is, for archaeologists, no professional college, no professional standards. And so we're trying to provide a little bit of guidance for you so that you can better assess who you might want to consult with to do this work. And currently there are 3 models for how to do the searching. The first is you can work with people like me, academics. Prior to the announcement in 2021 of Tekelnaf Teshakwarkmak, there were, by my estimation, 16 communities across the country who had been doing this work. Academics are good at developing methods, but we tend to be slow. You can hire a consulting company, and these are faster, but we have also heard of concerns from communities working with companies whose motivations include making money. Profit may not be the best way to approach this work. The reality is that none of these technologies was developed for this work. So the people who know how to use the technology may not know how to look for missing children or to work with survivors. And lastly, you can do this work in your community. We think this is the best choice, that this sacred work be done by the communities themselves. You have a great leader here, for example, in the work with Jonasi Akumalak. And at UBC and with Musqueam, we offer training where we tell everybody who joins us that you can do this work, no matter what your background. The team at Musqueam, for example, now includes ground penetrating radar as part of their toolkit and is starting to offer this at work at residential school landscapes. I have a few final thoughts for you to consider. The technology is always in development, and we always benefit from sharing our knowledge and our understanding. The National Advisory Committee can help you make these connections. Any information that comes from the children belongs to you. It is yours, and do not let anybody take it from you. At Musqueam, the community there refers to the work that we do as listening to the ancestors. That the GPR, for example, listens to the voices of children. And these voices are yours and yours alone. So your data sovereignty, your data governance, your data management, these are your rights. We could use, I think we need a national training program to help communities develop their own search teams so they don't have to rely on outsiders. If we're going to do that, we need to find better ways to provide communities with data and to help them to maintain their own archives and their own data sovereignty. Many communities that have already taken steps already have a lot of capacity, and we are in danger of leaving behind some of those who do not. Some communities need staff, equipment, facilities for support for survivors, digital, physical archival infrastructure to manage and to run searches. And of course, many of them have many demands on their time and their resources. If you ask government officials, such as Patrick and David, who spoke yesterday, they will tell you that it is not their mandate to provide this kind of infrastructure. But we can ask, whose mandate is it? These are necessary parts of the work, and they should be funded. You will hear denialists making claims that sound like the technical work is flawed. But denialists are not interested in evidence. They do not rely on facts. This is just smoke and mirrors to help them hide from the colonial and racist truths of Canada's history, which they do not want to acknowledge. And we know there's a lot of anxiety about funding, about how long it will be available. We hear from the government that they understand how big this task is, and they're committed to support. But we know that this is currently funded through political choice, and that that can change. I'm sure Kimberly Murray is making the case for stable long-term funding of a scale needed for the work ahead. And I will confess to you that I have very little patience for anybody who says there's not enough money for this work. As you know better than me, Canada is a very wealthy nation because it is built on the theft of Indigenous lands and resources, and residential schools were built to facilitate this theft. So the argument that there is no money for this sacred work makes no sense. There is always money. What is missing is the choice to use it. Thank you very much.
It's always hard to be the last panelist after two powerful people speak. I want to thank you for welcoming me into this traditional land here in Iqaluit. Cold but very warm welcome. It's always an honor to attend these national gatherings and meet with survivors. Today I have the privilege to speak as a committee member of the National Advisory Committee in Residential Schools of Missing Children and Unmarked Burials. My name is Dr. Jocks. You can call me Rebecca, and I'm a citizen of Métis Nation, and I come from the Métis homeland located in Northern Ontario. I work as a forensic pathologist and investigating coroner in the province of Ontario, and I have been invited to speak about forensic work as it pertains to the search and recovery of residential schools' missing children, our children. The TRC calls to action number 71 to 76 specifically involve unmarked burials. As a forensic pathologist, call to action number 74 really speaks to the forensic work, in which I quote the commissioners state that they call upon the federal government to work with churches and Aboriginal community leaders to inform the families of children who died at residential schools of the child's burial location, and to respond to families' wishes for appropriate commemoration ceremonies and markers, and reburial in home communities where requested. This last part about reburial really speaks to forensic disciplines. You need forensic disciplines to do this work properly, namely to perform scientific exhumations, identifications, autopsies, and repatriation to proper family and community. For families and communities that decide to use forensic work in the search and recovery of their children, the forensic work works in conjunction with preparatory research related to documentation, oral history, and testimony, but after the non-invasive site examinations such as ground penetrating radar. In the forensic context, each of these activities represent different types of information and evidence. So you may be wondering what forensic disciplines can offer in the search and recovery of children that did not return home after they were sent to residential school. When I meet with families and communities, I'm often asked 5 frequently asked questions. And in my answer, I use the term human remains or ancestral human remains, which means a dead human body or any portion of a dead body. So in this context, it can include an intact skeleton or even bone fragments. So the first question that I get asked is, what is forensics? I watch TV, I know what you guys do. Many people commonly think of forensic disciplines such as forensic biology, forensic anthropology, and forensic pathology are used for criminal investigations in courts. And you would be correct. But the term forensics simply means applying disciplines such as medicine and science to problems of law. But there's another side of forensics. That's the humanitarian aspect of our work. The tools from forensic science and medicine can be used to make positive identifications in people that have died. We do this using the postmortem examination, also known as the autopsy, history and descriptions of what is known about loved ones, and applying a variety of techniques, such as comparing DNA from the person that has died to the DNA of living biological family members. In that way, we can be certain that we returned loved ones that have died to their appropriate family members so that families can honor and commemorate their loved ones. In addition, we heard on the very first day about reconciliation starts with truth, and I agree. And forensics is a tool for truth finding from a scientific perspective. In fact, forensic experts serve as credible sources of evidence that may be used in legal systems to support claims of truth. However, forensic disciplines do not hold all the answers. Like other forms of Western science, forensics needs to be used alongside the laws, protocol, knowledge, ethics, and spiritual practices of Indigenous peoples. The second frequently asked question I get is, what role can forensics play in residential schools' unmarked burials? Forensic disciplines can play a role in residential schools if families and communities choose to exhume, which is to remove the land from unmarked burials and examine human remains and make possible identifications. This can only be achieved by performing a scientific exhumation, an autopsy, and using ancillary investigations in addition to the histories about the person that has died. But it also requires partnership with families and communities. Forensics provides a systemic, stepwise approach for the dignified search, recovery, examination, and possible identification of human remains that may be discovered in burials. This can be achieved by respecting Indigenous protocols and ceremonies, Forensics and Indigenous ceremonies are not mutually exclusive. Families and communities can choose to have a staged approach where you can gather different types of scientific data at each stage, but the process can be abbreviated at any stage as long as communities and families agree on the chosen methodology. So, for example, a staged approach after the ground penetrating radar or other search technologies would be to remove the superficial level of the land to see, is the GPR's indication of a probable burial a true burial? You could go on and completely remove the land to see, are there actually human remains still here? You could go on further and examine the bones that may be present to look for indicators of biological age, any evidence of disease or injury. And you could even take another step further to take a sample of DNA for identification purposes. Forensics is an essential tool for humanitarian action as it may bring answers and relief to bereaved families and their communities. By helping fulfill obligations towards the dead, we can assert our own humanity. The uniqueness of forensic application in humanitarian work is that it provides a box full of tools and knowledge adaptable to different settings, which can assist in humanitarian work on the dead. It is also this knowledge and expertise that make us expert witnesses in courts of law. Forensic work can gather different types of evidence and provide different types of services along the way, and I'll group them into 5 categories. One is the scientific exhumation, one is identification, cause of death, expert testimony, and next of kin clinics. So scientific identification, again, is removing the land, but this is actually a destructive process because you're removing the land, and information can be gathered just on how the land is and the positionality if there are human remains present. And at this step, there are already other forensic processes that are being initiated, including chain of custody and identification. Identification requires preparatory research based on documentation, oral history, and other records to determine who that person was recovered belongs to. Identification starts where the human remains are found and ideally ends with returning the loved one to their family so the family can proceed with their funeral customs. However, there are many steps in between to have a successful identification. Forensic experts partner with families and utilize other records to learn about the person that has died. In addition, DNA samples and related technologies and expertise will be required to try and maximize the chance of successful identification. This will require comparing the DNA of living biological relatives to the DNA from human remains. This is not without many challenges, and due to these challenges, there is a real possibility that many of these children may remain unidentified. So prior to exhumation, considerations about the willingness of family members to give a DNA sample and decisions about how to commemorate unidentified children need to be made. With respect to cause of death, the postmortem examination or autopsy is also an opportunity to try and determine what happened to these children, but also what caused their deaths. Like identification, we have many challenges that face me as a forensic pathologist, because over time, human remains normally undergo the natural breakdown processes and eventually fully return to the land. At this point in time, the human remains that may still persist will be skeletal remains, bones. So to make a cause of death, the cause of death must be in the bones, but most causes of death are in soft tissues like the brain, heart, and lungs. The soft tissues have likely already disappeared as a result, and therefore the determination of the cause of death will likely be undetermined in most cases, which means we won't know why they died. In terms of expert testimony, due to the widening knowledge between lay persons and experts, the role of experts has become increasingly important in legal proceedings, such as criminal trials. Expert witnesses are individuals that are permitted to express opinions, but only on matters based on their area of expertise, gained through specialized knowledge, skills, training, and experience. Forensic experts testify in courts of law as expert witnesses, again, to serve as credible sources to support claims of truth. We are also accustomed to using systematic approaches that utilize scientific, forensic, and medical standards that are scrutinized by legal systems and by our peers. In other words, we're used to having our work being put under the microscope. And a little note about next of kin clinics. As experts, our work does not end with the legal system. Many forensic experts are connected to death investigations where there are opportunities for families to understand our work and speak with experts to have further understandings. We call these next of kin clinics, and these are appointments with forensic experts, but they require health and wellness supports, as families have the opportunity to ask questions of experts and sometimes hear really hard answers. The third frequently asked question that I get is, what are the limitations of forensic work? And these fall primarily into 4 categories. First, whole bodies are very unlikely to be recovered. There may be bones present within unmarked burials, but children's bones don't persist as long as adults and may disappear due to natural breakdown. Second, it may not be possible to identify all human remains. There likely will be very few, if any, identifications. The uncertainty of not knowing the identity of loved ones by families before the confirmed identification is extremely distressing. Decisions around honoring and commemoration of unidentified human remains, despite exhaustive efforts, needs to be decided before the work is underway. Third, the forensic work takes a long time, likely will take years. Fourth, forensic experts are largely housed in death investigation systems that are largely a colonial construct. There are a few Indigenous folks that work in forensics, but we are here, and many death investigation systems do want to assist, but this has to be done in a way that puts relationships first, is transparent and accountable, is culture and trauma informed, and that recognizes and appreciates the reciprocal capacity and expertise of Indigenous knowledge holders. In addition, there's no national death investigation system, resulting in a lack of national standards in death investigation in Canada. The fourth frequently asked question, what are reasonable goals associated with forensic work? First, it's an opportunity to honor and commemorate our children. It's also a possibility of scientific correlation with other records and learn more about these children. It's also an opportunity to build capacity in our communities and Indigenous police services. The 5 frequently asked question I get is, what should I consider before exhumation? First, I think you need to create protocols of engagement to address the potential cultural gulf between Indigenous peoples and the forensic team in order to formalize the partnership. This will allow forensic teams to respect and adhere to Indigenous laws and protocol. Because Indigenous communities hold the expertise in these areas, it comes from our communities. It should be Indigenous-led and survivor-centric. Indigenous-led principles and processes must guide every aspect of searches and investigation relating to the missing children and unmarked burials in accordance with Indigenous protocols and laws. This includes access and protection of data and records, as Andrew's talked about. But ground searches, health and wellness, forensic investigative techniques, and accountability and justice mechanisms. Most importantly, the Indigenous communities must lead the gathering of survivors' truths, as they are best placed to do so from Indigenous rights-based perspective using a trauma-informed approach. You also need to consider the willingness of affected biological families to provide DNA samples for the purpose of identification of recovered human remains. I think a national DNA strategy is one example how we can model partnership between families and forensics that is grounded in Indigenous ethics. 3, you need to consider how unidentified children will be honored and commemorated. 4, consider the intention to pursue accountability through legal systems in the event that the forensic work results in evidence that could be used in a criminal prosecution. I know the TV shows show the forensic pathologist making arrests. I've never made an arrest in my life. Law enforcement does that. And 5, consider the impact on families and communities. And the forensic document that you have on your table is a short version. We have a longer version as well that I authored, and that one has been peer-reviewed internationally, but it has also been endorsed by United Nations Special Rapporteur, Dr. Morris Tinball-Binns, to really align with UNDRIP. So we don't have that today, but it should be on our website shortly. Miigwech. And we'll open the floor for questions.
Awesome. Thanks, guys, for such an amazing panel and doing all of this really hard work. I'm going to open it up to questions. I'm going to go over here first because I saw her hand first.
Hi, my name is Lisa Miswag, and I'm here as a policy analyst for the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs. I know I was listening to your online panel that you recently had, and I know there was a discussion about the LiDAR funding. Are there any updates with that so far as to when LiDAR funding will be available in 2024?
Hello. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. No, unfortunately there is no update. I think the conversation there was that Indigenous Services Canada has, I think it's an ongoing program with the First Nations Technology Council, offer training to pilot drones for communities. So community members can learn how to get licensing to fly drones, because drones of a certain size are aircraft, and so you need to have national licensing in order to use them. They're often used for many purposes, but LiDAR is one. The current system does not provide training with LiDAR. I spoke to David Russell yesterday, reminding him that this would be a fairly easy step, I would think. I don't know, but I would think it would be a fairly easy step. To add this piece to an existing program. I have not heard if that is possible. I will make one further observation. Although LiDAR from drones is a useful approach, we just started using handheld devices, which seem to work in a similar way, but you don't need a license to fly a drone to do it. We've just started working with those just before the break, so in the fall. And we'll have some results, I hope, in the coming months on how we might have devices that you can just get in a case and then walk around with to collect these data. They're very valuable because they give you a map of the landform, and if there's a surface pattern, a shape to a grave, and sometimes, certainly in cemeteries, you'll see a mound or maybe even a depression, LiDAR, with enough resolution, can map those out. And so you can identify unmarked graves. They lack perhaps a monument, but they have a shape with only LiDAR. And of course, it also helps then locating things like ground penetrating radar within. So just to give you a sense, if you buy a LiDAR drone, the unit would cost about $50,000. A handheld tool would be about the same. And we're just trying those out. So there are some options. This is something that I think many communities will want to do. The drone has one advantage that the handheld tool doesn't. If you're dealing with a landscape, as many communities are, of hundreds of acres or hectares, I'm old enough to still think in imperial terms sometimes, the drone is a very efficient way to do that. The handheld device is good for smaller spaces. So.
Good morning. My name is Mervyn Texbuvi. I guess I'm from Northern Region 3 in Northern Saskatchewan. And I just had a couple of questions, I guess. One question is, you talk about science, talk about modern science most of the time. I'm just wondering, in your expertise, what is cultural science to you? That's one question. And the other question is regarding, you talk about children. And we know that in a lot of communities, we had these nuns, they had babies from the priests. So I'm just wondering, where are the babies in this picture? You know, I know we talk about the children, but where are the babies that the nuns got rid of? Two questions.
I'll begin, and then perhaps Rebecca can follow up. Science, I think, is framed sometimes as a Western thing, but it is not. It's an understanding of the world, which comes from many traditions, and cultural science is a way, I think, just a recognition that you don't have to have sometimes the very distanced language of science to still have the understandings. In our coursework, where we work with Musqueam, we try and demystify some of these technologies, some of these words. We come up with our own language to try and help people see that it's very accessible. A lot of what we do in the course is really just to reassure people that they can do it, that they don't have to rely on outsiders, that it's possible, because they already have the skills. We're just adding a few pieces that they can learn relatively accessibly. In terms of infants, we know this, we've heard this story. It makes it more challenging because their remains are more fragile, and their size, of course, in a grave, for example, is small. But it isn't impossible. We have, in our work with Musqueam, located infants in cemetery contexts, so using radar. So it is possible. It makes it more challenging, but I don't think those challenges should stop us from doing the work. We face similar challenges in underwater contexts. It will be difficult, but we will try.
So going back to asking a definition about cultural science, I would take a step back, and if you look at science of our ancestors, they were great scientists. And we know in contemporary times, we think about Indigenous artwork, yesterday comedy, but we were amazing scientists. We were great observational scientists, experimental scientists, and we had a holistic view of science. So we were amazing scientists. And I think today, when I read science from Indigenous authors that are scientists, it's richer. The words are richer. The science is pretty dry, like Western type science is pretty dry. And I think there's a richness to it because it has that holistic worldview. For babies, from a forensic perspective, because babies are more cartilage than bone, they're not going to persist as well. So certainly if we go to the process of doing exhumations, and we will see what we see. We have to be really humble about the work and not have expectations. And so sometimes I'm asked in court, well, what would you expect, Dr. Jocks, in this case? And I'm like, I don't have expectations. I have to observe what I observe, just like our ancestors did.
Yeah, good morning, Tanse. My name is Louis Gardner from a historic Métis community of Isla Cross, which was founded in 1776. So we're going to be celebrating 250 years in a couple years here. I guess we're defined as a Métis residential school. Back then, the survivors, I'm a survivor myself. I went in there when I was 5 years old. Now, I didn't know what a Métis residential school versus a First Nation residential school was. Nobody knew, really. We're actually one of the first residential schools in all of Canada. Very historic community. But today, we're still fighting for recognition. And I hear a lot of messages being told that no survivor will be left behind. We still consider ourselves survivors. We're just battling the challenges of getting recognition, you know, and how we do it through. And we're basically now being told the school, Métis school, is handled by the province. I said, no. Province tells us, no, we were never involved. So we're kind of a political football now. But yet, we're still trying to fight for recognition in respect of all the survivors. Some have never told their story. I relate to the elder. My parents were survivors. They never said nothing to us about residential school. They used alcohol as the way out. Now we're trying to do some unmarked burials ourselves, but to us, we don't qualify. Now it's a big cost. And so how do you tell survivors that you don't qualify? Just, you know, and it's not a right message. It's just not the right thing to say. You know, it just doesn't sit well. So I just, and it affects 12 communities from around our area, in the intergenerational stuff. And what we're trying to find is bring closure to exactly is, you know, where the unmarked burials in our community, in our school. Some of our elders said some know where they are. Some of it is piled up. I don't know if you can identify the bones if they're piled up. And a lot of elders tell us that if you find it, do not dig. Just leave them rest in peace. A lot have said that. As long as we know the story, the truth, and then how do you begin reconciliation? So I guess in essence, just, you know, that it's a big challenge for us. We're trying to find, we've been meeting with private, I don't know what you would call them, the people that want to do the work for the unmarked burials. You know, how do you tell our survivors that you guys are being left behind because of a political battle? You know, it just doesn't sit well. So I don't know where this can go, but it's a message as a survivor that I need to send to the community itself, meaning Canada and everywhere else. Thank you. Yeah.
I just want to follow up with that, and the two of you can jump in too if you'd like. So we do have residential school survivors from the same residential school, and they kill me because every chance they get, they're advocating for that residential school. And I'm taking notes about how they do it because I'm learning from them. So I can tell you from our group, every opportunity, they are advocating as best as they can. Next month, we will be, the National Advisory Committee will be in Regina, Saskatchewan. And so I invite you to come to our regional gathering, March 5th, sorry. Thank you, March 6th, 7th. And then I think the other question was about consulting companies, the ones that are trying to help.
Yeah, the funding is, of course, an issue. The government, I think, as I will observe, sort of as an outsider, they're trying to limit, you know, the whole 140, the numbers they create, and the exclusion of Villa Crosse and other places is a way of containing what they have to spend. It sounds harsh, but I think that's part of the conversation, and we can add our voice to yours, not only for La Crosse, but anywhere where children are. They should get the same attention and the same resources. I think that's a priority at our committee, and we can add our voice to yours. For hiring companies, we're working on a document that will help guide you in making decisions. Certainly this is something you might want to just reach out to myself or my colleague Keisha Supernaut from the University of Alberta. We can give you some advice on what we think a company should provide and things to look for if they don't, before you make decisions. there isn't enough capacity right now in the country to do this work of searching. There aren't enough people who can do it. There isn't enough equipment. And much of that equipment and those people are not Indigenous. So our effort is to include training so that communities can do this work themselves. That's our preferred pathway, but it will take time to build that capacity up. So you have to be cautious about who you engage. This equipment is deployed in a lot of places, not for this work. It's used to map out pipes and service lines, rebar and concrete. So there are people who use this equipment, but not for this work. And they can claim they have skills, and they do. It may not translate as well. And they can learn, but there is still a bit of a gap. So yeah, please be in touch about specific questions.
I just wanted to add another thing. As a Métis woman, it's just this legacy that keeps going on about our experience, Métis experience in residential school. And every time this happens, it's just reopening that wound. Like, we keep getting ignored, and this feels like another way of ignoring us.
Pusho, bebde kweden geninde konuşta bekwenda. Gigondo de mawe fshike genin ginot magna. Intomne singin binche ba kamkong binchachi. Kabuni genishin kade de abunchi kobni go. So I thank the panelists for their presentation this morning. But I guess as I'm thinking back to the early days of when unmarked burials were first on the radar, I remember watching on TV, national TV program that showed the situation. I believe it was in Oklahoma, where the tribes went right into the sites, and they were digging up they put in the remains into these little wooden boxes, putting them on their pickup trucks, and just a caravan of trucks taking their children home. They took control of the whole situation. They didn't ask permission from anybody. They just did what they needed to do, what they felt was the right thing to do. And I just was so awestruck, and both awestruck and shocked by what they were doing. But you just watch this unfold but for us here in Canada, we don't seem to be taking that, taking everything by control of the reins, sort of thing. It's as if we've got so many blocks in front of us that keep us from doing what we know is the right thing to do. I just wanted to raise that as an issue, and I'd like to hear from the panel what your thoughts are on that very thing. Miigwech.
Miigwech, Donna. Yeah, I read about that also in the news. I think you're right at the location of Oklahoma. I don't know all of the details other than what's in the news, so sometimes hard to gather. And so just one of my concerns from that approach is I hope they got all the bones. That's my concern based on, but I don't know how they went about doing it. Did they do a scientific exhumation? Were they largely intact? Like, it look like a full skeleton? If you have commingled remains, which was brought up before, you have to separate. You have to know how to separate. So you don't want to put two left femur bones together. That's two individuals. I feel like that's my concern from a scientific perspective. So it depends on what the remains look like, what they knew, all the historical context, what was the oral history, the testimonies related to that. And I think to a point, if you don't want to do additional scientific investigations for doing DNA, which would be cutting out a piece of the bone, that's a bit destructive, that's okay as well. I think that we can stop at whatever stage that we want, as long as we know that we agree about where we want to stop beforehand. And I think that's probably the hardest part, is having consensus. Some people don't want exhumation, and that's okay as well. And some people want to go all the way to identification. They want to go through and get legal justice. So getting consensus on that is probably the hardest part.
Ublakut Uvlami Lillian, Andrew, and Dr. Forgot your.
Oh, Rebecca, you can call me Rebecca.
Rebecca? Okay. Andrew gave me the news they found my grandmother. She's buried in Edmonton or in St. Albert. He told me yesterday. So it's possible to find your loved ones. I finally found my grandmother, great-grandmother. So it's possible for each of you who are looking for your family and loved ones. Thank you. I want to message him to tell you you can find them with help. They found my grandmother yesterday. They told me. That's all I wanted to say.
Hello. My name is Susan Pepper. I'm from Inuvik, Northwest Territories. I was listening to Lillian's story about her husband. We talk a lot about unmarked burials, missing children, and that's so important. That's what we have to do to put closure to our own healing and our wellness. But again, we have to think about the people that are dead inside. They're dead inside. They don't have nothing. Their eyes are empty, and they're still walking around, and they're unmarked. Nobody knows who they are. Like, they're walking around and nobody knows who they are and where they come from. So we have to think of those people too. They're still living with us. They're still here with us. I just want to put that on record so that we don't forget about people that are still alive today and are walking, but unmarked because they don't know how to deal with the pain inside. We've talked about treatment center for so many years in our northern communities, and still nothing. You talked about, money shouldn't be an issue. But every time we bring it to leadership, every time we bring it to whoever is in control or has the power to, no money, sorry. We don't have any money for treatment centers, but our people are walking around dead. We have to consider that too, and don't leave those out, because Punch, Lillian's husband, died before he was able to enjoy his life to the fullest, because he could have. He was a very caring man. And he's gone now. So is my husband. My husband was 11 years in residential school. He never held my girls because he was too scared to break them. That's residential school. That is the impacts of it. So as we work together as Canadian citizens of Canada, free world, free, you could say whatever you want to anybody. But we still have people on the streets that are unmarked. Don't ever forget that, because we need to help them too. Thank you.
Miigwech. Good morning. My name is Mandy, and I'm originally from Attawapiskat First Nation. I'm just wondering, I haven't heard much talk about involving our traditional healers and seers in the burial sites investigations and the forensic investigations. We we often rely on our traditional healers and seers to help with our names, our clans, you know, our vision interpretations and things like that. And I'm just wondering why that kind of door isn't open to our traditional healers in this process, because they could help before even disturbing sites to know who exactly is there. And I know there's other communities here that rely on traditional healers, and has helped them, you know, put names to cite those that were there. So if someone could answer that, I'd really appreciate it. Miigwech.
Yeah, absolutely. We have like a subcommittee for cultural protocols, and we're working on content where, so in a way, like the ground searches are like this vertical component, forensics a vertical component, but horizontal is the narrative part of people's experiences through the whole process. Wellness and health, cultural ceremonies, protocols, and Indigenous law. So we're trying to better weave in all of these components in terms of things that we can deliver. But certainly that is, as I said, is not mutually exclusive to forensic work. Like these can work together, certainly. And we've, in Ontario, we've done it, so.
And I'll just mention one additional thing. In communities that I'm aware of out west, the Tishat, for example, approach the searches as a form of ceremony. So the technology, the work that is done on the ground is research, but it's research is ceremony. And so there's an intentional embracing of research within the ceremonial space. And other communities speak also of a landscape, a spiritual landscape, for which we need spiritual expertise, not technological expertise, to understand the spirits of the children where there is trauma, and to help. So I think these go very well together, and communities should find this as a path for themselves. I don't think you need to choose. They work well beside each other and as the same thing in some ways.
I just want to mention about the sacred burial grounds. Sacred burial grounds are very sacred, very, very sacred, because they used to, years ago, back many years ago, they didn't bury their people underground. They just buried them on top the land, put few boards on it, cover them up. Why I call it so sacred, if it's, at one time I went up, I was just a little girl. Cute little girl, I guess. Always say that because my mother always said that I was just a round little girl. Anyways, we were living in Herschel Island. We weren't living in the Delta. We lived in Herschel Island. I think it's because my grandfather, Harry in Iqaluit, was a worker for the boats. Remember those boats that used to go down to different communities? Well, he used to work for St. Rock. And there, they used to take us around, go camping all over. One time we went camping in this place, and there was somebody was buried on top the hill, and I found so beautiful beads. My brother kept telling me, you can't touch it. Mom and Dad say that you can't touch it, and our grandparents say you can't touch anything that belongs to that person in that grave. And I thought, it's okay, but I really want those beads. They were so colorful. Small little beads, just all different colors. I snuck, I don't know how many, maybe 3 or 4. I snuck them home. I never told my parents because they told us never to touch anything that belongs to that person. And then I brought it home and I forgot about it. I guess in maybe a couple of days or a week. I thought of them, I was going to look for them. And they were gone. They were gone out of where I hid them. Then I thought to myself, gee, I wonder if my parents were looking at me when I was hiding them. I never asked them or anything. But when I lost them, I said, I lost my little beads I got from that grave up there. Ara, you're not supposed to touch anything, I told you. It belongs to that person. They were gone. They were back in the grave. I checked there, and here they were. They were there again. Then I thought to myself, well, who brought them up there? It might have been my parents telling me that I'm not supposed to touch anything. So they brought them up there, or they went up there by themselves. That's why I always call the graves very sacred graves. And one time I remember seeing 2 bones. One person laying there and another little bone beside it. And then I never asked questions, so then I thought to myself, might have been that person that was buried there with their baby. They must have both died when something happened in life, like, when she was giving birth, maybe. Anyways, that was today when they talk about looking for people. It's good. It's good to know where your people are buried, where your people have been. Just to know that they're there. It gives you release of your thinking about that person. I think it's a really good thing. But to me, I'm an elder, and they're still sacred. But when you find them, like Navaluk saying that they found her among, I'm so thankful that they did, because they could put her to rest now. So a couple of summers ago, we were in Edmonton. We had a lot of them that was buried here, there, and some of them, they said were buried on top of each other. They just buried them there and put another one on top, another one. They had them like that. But it's so good to know. We had a friend there that found out about his father where his father was buried, and it was so good to see the release that he got after we prayed and we said a few words to his father. It was so beautiful. Beautiful to see that when you find someone that you lost many years ago. It's so good to see that. And yet we have people like that around. Young people like that around us. Around us because they're lost. They don't know what they're doing. They can't, they're not buried, still walking around, but still have no life. All they could think of is quenching that so hurt They're hurting. They don't know how to get out of there, and it's hard for them. And it's just like being walking around, just like don't know what they're doing. They go here, there, ask for help, but when they ask for help, the help that they get is not, it don't go into them. That's why I lost a lot of my relatives through that. I knew what was happening with them, but I couldn't help them because I couldn't go there and just get everything out of what they're holding. The more you hold things in your heart, your body, like, you know, you're worried about the things that you worry about makes you sick. That's why you see a lot of cancer, a lot of different kind of sickness, because their minds, they say your mind is more stronger than what you could do for yourself. Thinking about all the things that happened yesterday. The yesterday's gone for me. Today, that's the way I look at it. Yesterday's gone. I'll never get back to it. I'll never, ever undo the things that I did back there. I would have, from here to back to Inuvik, I get that long of things that I have to worry about. But when you learn to forget it and start living today for who you are, what you can do, you can become happy, joyful that you're alive. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. So my name is George Bicciano. I'm from Chisarasibi. So we're currently looking at, we had two residential schools. It was formerly Fort George Island, so we had a French and an English school. So we're on the team for the GPR search and everything. And I just wanted to make a quick comment about the question about the elders. We had a working committee. We had elders on that committee. And before we started any work, we had an ancestral ceremony, ancestral feast. And we were going to do a 4-day fire. But there was a major forest fire in our area during that time, so we couldn't do it. There was a fire ban, everything. So instead, we did the pipe ceremony. But the elders that we invited to, we told them, this is what we're doing. And if and eventually we do find something, we're going to need your assistance. So they know what they're looking for. They know what they need to do if we ever do find something. So that was, and the question I had for Dr. Rebecca, I guess, we've also heard the stories about the furnaces. Where we are in Fort George, the whole place was raised, covered and everything. But we know where the furnaces are, and what are the chances of getting anything, DNA or anything, from those furnaces?
So the short answer is it's really unlikely. And so the long answer is more scientific. So one is certainly you can look in the area. Depending what's there, there's a sifting process that you can do and see if you have to distinguish ancestral human remains from other things. And then the issue of fire. So certainly DNA has been able to be recovered from bones that have been burnt, but when they're exposed to high temperatures, like usually in a furnace, the yield is nil. There's not much to yield from it. So you can look, but just have your expectations that there might not be anything that you can, from a scientific perspective, get from. But there's other parts to this. The science is just one part, right? there is what our survivors tell us. That's evidence in and of itself. Those stories are so important. So there will always be gaps in science. It's not perfect. And that's where the importance of survivors telling their stories, if they're comfortable, is so important for us.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Lavers Samar. I'm responsible and I work with the OSI protocols. I just want a couple of quick announcements. I just want to acknowledge all the survivors in the room and at the gathering and across Turtle Island, the strength of courage of our survivors, and just want to acknowledge that and acknowledge our sisters for lighting the Iqaluit. I want to acknowledge all of our love and family that we have here today. I just want a couple of quick announcements. We're going to be doing a fire. My friend George mentioned a fire in his community. As we started our mandate a little over a year and a half ago, we started off in Treaty 6 territory, and our elders out there, we had a sacred fire. And we took those, at the conclusion of that fire, we had, throughout our gathering, we added the tissues, which you'll see the bags today, and we're going to add them to our fire this afternoon. So we started, and our elders had talked to us and our survivors, and we started we took our ashes from that fire in Edmonton in the Treaty 6, and we went to Treaty 1 territory, and we went to Winnipeg, and we took those ashes to Winnipeg to start our fire, went to Vancouver, we took our ashes, we started our fire in Vancouver. We went to Montreal. We took our fire there. And we took the prayers each time, the prayers and strength of our survivors and our families, to Montreal, Toronto, and now up north, the Nunavut territory. So this afternoon, we're going to be putting our ashes, your prayers, for our loved ones, for the spirits of our missing children, and our empty chair. So the medicines will be added to that fire this afternoon, and we'll have that, and we're going to take our ashes from this fire, and we'll take them to our next gathering in Ottawa. I just want to mention that and let you know that we'll be doing that. So thank you very much, and I really appreciate it. And if anyone that has added some treasures, we call them, to our empty chair, just come and see me. I just want to acknowledge you. Thank you.